Welcome all to the 2021 webinar series, Learning to Listen, Learning Through Listening. This is our first presentation in this series, and we are excited that this series of webinars that we offer for free to families, to professionals, to any and all who want to attend, we get to share that with you thanks to the support from Butte Creek Foundation. With that, I want to just very quickly share a little bit about listening together. Many of you are quite familiar with our mission and our vision, but for all of those joining us for the first time, Listening Together is a nonprofit organization, and our aim is to empower parents, train professionals, engage with communities around the world to transform the lives of children who are deaf and hard of hearing. We envision an inclusive world where children who are deaf and hard of hearing can achieve their personal best without being constrained by where they live, how much money their parents have, so on and so forth. We are not associated with any other organizations that related to hearing loss or hearing loss products. We are fully independent and run fully on support from foundations and donors like you. So with that, let's get into some more details. Very quickly, our priorities for 2021 are to increase access to information. We know that we can't achieve our goal without everybody in our communities having information to current knowledge, important innovations and research. We want to also make sure that it's not just about knowledge, but the development of skills, and not just within professionals, but also within families, individual and group level. And finally, we believe that it is important to foster leadership at all levels to create change. Sometimes leadership just means the person in charge of a school, the person in charge of a center, the leader of the day-to-day. We see it differently. We see that every person engaging in this work has the possibility, has the potential to create change, and therefore become a leader. So we foster leadership at the family level as well as the professional level, with the intent that we will be creating change in the world. Very quickly, we have 3 areas we focus on, and I will talk more about this towards the end, but we work with families, professionals, and communities. Check out our Stories of Maya and Sid book. I see from the audience that we have many in the audience who have seen and read the Maya and Sid books. So please feel free to share information about it in the chat with everybody. I see many people in here who have taken our professional development classes. Feel free to share your thoughts about it in the chat. And same thing with parent empowerment. I see many of our families in the audience. So, please share your thoughts or more about the programs. We are a team of women with roots in India, currently living in the US. Aladani is behind the scenes and typing and managing all things chat and question answer. I am here presenting, and Uma Medidari, our board member and parent of a bilateral cochlear implant user who works with us on many aspects of listening together, will be here either today later or tomorrow for tomorrow's chat. So small team, big work. We invite all of you to join us. Let's hear from you a little bit. I'm going to post a poll, and I want to know who is in the audience. Are you a parent, a family member, professional, or a student? What is your first language? Is this your first time attending our webinar? And what device are you connecting with us from? So I'll give you all a couple minutes. And we will do that. Thank you for answering. We have about 60% who have answered. Waiting for a few more answers. I hope you can still hear me because my view and screen just changed. And I'm hoping that we still have folks in the audience. Yes, okay, good. So I live near Chicago in the US, and we just got a warning with saying high winds today, potential power outage. So I'm a little, nervous about this, but I think we will be fine and we will continue on. This is being recorded for whatever reason. If everything crashes, we will complete a recording and post it. We will be presenting this tomorrow in Hindi. All right, thank you all who voted. We have 82% voting, and I'm going to share the results really quickly. We have many professionals joining us, several students, excellent, excellent, with many different home languages and many returning friends, many new friends. That is fantastic. Many of you are attending from your cell phone. I hope this is visible to all of you. Okay, now to the main topic. The first part of this series, which is learning to listen and learning through listening, is something that we developed in response to the information we got from all of you last year. Last year's series was language and literacy. And one of the things that kept coming up over and over again from parents, from professionals, was related to auditory intervention, auditory development. So we have a series this year focusing on that. Stay tuned, but we have some exciting guest speakers coming up in the following months. And that will also be something to look for. So today we are just going to start by talking about auditory development, hearing loss, and hearing technology. And then next week we will continue this conversation. Instead of learning objectives, what I wrote out was key concepts. These are 5 things I really want all of you to know, remember, write down on a piece of paper, write down on your brain, write down in your heart. Really, really take this information to use it in everyday life, whether you are a parent or a professional. So everybody take a second and read. And we will talk about each of these areas as we go. So I'm not going to read this out loud. Oh, you know what I forgot to mention? As we are going through, if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A. Don't raise your hand at this point, only because we won't have a chance to talk until the end. But if you type in the question and answers, the Q&A box, it will, Aladmi is watching all of that, and we will have a ongoing check on what questions are coming up, what needs to be answered. So I see somebody has raised their hand, but if you have a question, please type it in the question and answer. All right. Very, very simply, how do we hear? Put simply, there are 5 parts of our ear and brain that are involved in interpreting sounds. We have the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear, the auditory nerve that goes to the brain. When there is an issue in any one of these areas or more than one of these areas, we see that there is an impact on hearing and interpreting sounds. I am super simplifying this. So if this is an area you would like more information about, be on the lookout for our handout, which will have more information about all of these things that you can go and learn on your own. But very simply, this is our auditory system. What is hearing loss? Like I said, when any one of these areas is impacted, we might see an impact on hearing, which can be from hearing loss. The human, this is an audiogram of familiar sounds. I hope this is something that most of you are familiar with. You have frequencies, so that's low pitch to high pitch, and you have decibels, so that's low volume to high volume, soft sounds to loud sounds. Spoken language cues are here, what we call the speech banana. What I want to emphasize today is when I trained in this field, we were told to, oh, the thresholds are in the speech banana. We know now that's not enough. Thresholds have to be above the speech banana to be able to access spoken language. We're going to talk more about this. So if you have questions, comments, or thoughts, either type in chat. Make sure they go to panelists and attendees, or if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. This is just an illustration of how we typically hear. A child who is learning to listen and learning through listening hears what is happening every day. Maybe the child is hearing what the parent is saying, what the parent is asking. Maybe he's just hearing something in his or her environment. Maybe the child is listening to songs, directions, questions, so on and so forth. When there is hearing loss, this input of language is impacted. In some cases, it's absent. In some cases, it's degraded or changed. And in some cases, it's just inconsistent. So the first key takeaway that I want you to know today is listening is a brain-based activity through the ears to the brain. Dr. Carol Flexer always says, hearing loss is a doorway problem. It stops sound from going to your brain. Degraded, inconsistent, absent auditory input. Another way to think about this is imagine that your brain is a computer and your ears are the keyboard. Everybody take a second and write down the nursery rhyme, Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Go ahead, everybody take a second and write it down. Okay, now that you have written it down, go ahead and erase, remove, cross out S, T, K, H, and D. I'll type in chat because this is like an auditory memory task. S, T, K, H, D. Erase it, remove it, try to do it. And now say the rhyme to yourself. Without S, T, K, H, and D, you are going to say, le, a, ow, I, wa, wa, oo, ah. That is a doorway problem. You heard what was said, but only part of it, because hearing loss impacted, prevented sound, all the sounds from going to your brain. If you put a hearing aid on, if you fix the keyboard, if the keys are restored, If you get a cochlear implant that allows you to listen, now you can hear all of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Okay, so that's lesson number 1. Listening is a brain-based activity. What and how much the brain hears in the first 3 years matters, and every second lost creates a delay. The ability of the brain to learn to listen, if there has been a delay or even if there hasn't been, depends on the age of the child. And this is related to brain plasticity, which we will have more webinars about, as well as the auditory input it receives. So say the brain is ready to listen, but all it is hearing is noise, background noise, TV noise, traffic noise, as opposed to a brain that is ready to listen and gets to listen to language. How the brain learns to listen is dependent on the age of the child as well as the input it receives. A really good resource to learn more about this is Dr. Carol Flexer's white paper, Start with the Brain and Connect the Dots. We will share that link in the handout. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A, and we can try to answer it or provide more resources related to it. So imagine when you are only hearing instead of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, it's going to impact listening skills, spoken language skills, speech and communication, social emotional development, as well as cognition and academics. A hearing loss is never just a hearing loss. It has a pretty significant impact on the young child, but also a long-term impact on the ability to communicate, the ability to learn in a classroom, so education, employment, relationships and social skills, and most importantly, quality of life. There was a comment in the chat early on from a parent who said, I'm a parent and professional, all educated and empowered by listening together through their courses, webinars, intervention, everything, I guess, to partner in their mission and vision of making our children lead enviable lives, especially in our multicultural, multilinguistic country. When we manage hearing loss, we can support children lead enviable lives, inclusive, productive, happy lives. If you want to hear me talk more about this, check out our webinar on mainstreaming children who are deaf and hard of hearing and inclusion. It is on our YouTube channel and available to view. One of the things we truly and deeply believe is that empowered families supported by knowledgeable and skilled professionals can transform a child's life trajectory. We say, find your team and reach your dream. So now we are going to shift into actual hearing loss management, diagnosis, and hearing technology. So before I move, if there are any questions that need to be answered based on what I have said so far, please put them in the Q&A. I see one question that has come up that is asking, what are the reasons behind hearing loss in infants? And all I will say right now is there are a variety of reasons, including genetic, hereditary, environmental, some kind of sickness, illness during development in utero. And for many children, causes of hearing loss are unknown. So that's all I will say for now, but we can guide you to a resource related to causes of hearing loss. We have another question that comes up many times about parents have been told to use only one language for therapy. It's not a simple yes, no answer, but we definitely say, focus on the language of the home and the heart. And if there happen to be multiple languages of the home and the heart, that is where we want to go. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit. We have another webinar recording related to supporting multiple language development in children who are deaf and hard of hearing, also on our YouTube channel, and you can check that out. Great question coming up next. I'm going to hold it for a minute and we will move forward. So hearing loss management. I'm using the word management, and management is very intentional. I am not saying cure to hearing loss. I am not saying fixing hearing loss. I'm saying managing hearing loss. In most children who are born with congenital hearing loss, or even develop hearing loss later on, for most children, that's a permanent hearing loss. So the attitude of managing hearing loss is probably a more realistic, lifelong attitude rather than fixing hearing loss with hearing technology or something. The hearing loss is part of the child's identity, is part of the child's description, is part of the child's being. And we're not going to erase it. We are going to manage it and help the child, the family, the community understand what the impact is and how we work with it. Okay, so the word management is very, very, very consciously used here. The first step to management is identification and diagnosis of hearing loss. Early hearing detection intervention, the Joint Committee on Infant Hearing, recommends that hearing loss should be screened and diagnosed by 3 months. This is possible when children have access to newborn hearing screening, which is not yet a reality in many, many places. But I think this is something that we can create awareness about, that we can share information about with the communities we live in, with our spheres of impact. If the desired outcome is listening and spoken language, if the family wants the child to learn to listen and speak, because some families might choose not to do that. Some families might choose to use sign language, or some families might choose to use a different modality. So when the family has chosen listening and spoken language, the next step is fitting of hearing technology to ensure access to the auditory spectrum. Remember that orange line at the top of the speech banana? That's where we want thresholds with hearing technology, with hearing aids and cochlear implants. And once we have that hearing technology, consistent programming and maintenance of this technology is crucial. By 6 months, we want families, we want children to be receiving family-centered intervention. Family-centered intervention has its own principles and practices, and we will be sharing more information about that in the handout as well as next week. At the heart of it is that we are supporting the language of the home and the heart, and we are supporting the family's desired outcomes by making sure that whatever therapy, whatever intervention is given is with the family at the center, as opposed to saying, oh, your kid is 2 months old, this is what we'll do. Your kid is 2 years old, this is what we'll do. Actually, family, you don't even need to come into the session. You can sit outside while we work with your child here. That's not what family-centered intervention is about. Family-centered intervention is where the family, the child together are supported by a team of professionals, which I think is my next slide. Oh, good. Families supported by a team of professionals. There are many people who are required to best support a child who is deaf and hard of hearing. Typically, the first person would be a pediatric audiologist who has knowledge, skills, and will be a consistent professional. I want everyone in the audience to note that not all audiologists are trained to work with very young children. So make sure that the audiologist that you reach out to has experience with babies, has experience with young children. And that experience matters. Why? One, because they are familiar with auditory development in young children. And two, hopefully they have developed amazing skills to work with wiggly, impatient 2-year-olds and get them to do audiological testing. I always say, I'm a teacher of the deaf. I always say a good pediatric audiologist is my best friend in making sure that I can support the family. The next professional who might be on your team is a speech language pathologist. And again, I'm saying a speech language pathologist with experience in developing listening and spoken language. Speech language pathologists are typically trained as generalists. So they know about autism, they know about hearing loss, they know about fluency, they know about feeding. But not everybody has expertise and deep knowledge in listening and spoken language development for children who are deaf and hard of hearing. So make sure as parents, you are asking your speech language pathologist what their knowledge is, what their background is. If you are a professional who trained as a generalist, figure out if this is the field you want to be in and how you can specialize in the knowledge that is in this field. I hope every single one of you has a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing on your team. A teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing when is often trained to not just think about listening or speech, but also language, literacy, academics, self-advocacy, social skills, and the whole child and the whole development. So a teacher of deaf and hard of hearing children with deep knowledge of listening and spoken language development is an excellent member to have on your team. Special and general education teachers will be people families and professionals encounter. Not all of them are going to start by having knowledge about spoken language development, but you as professionals who are experts in the field, parents who have all these experiences and expertise in their child's development can help special and general education teachers develop their knowledge and skills related to listening and spoken language development. And finally, a key member of the team who is not seen very often, but is an important member, is the ENT or the otologist, the doctor who can address the medical aspects related to hearing loss. So think about all of these team members. Some team members are going to see the child more often than others, and make sure that just because a person has a particular degree, but is only maybe seeing the child once every 6 months, that their opinion isn't taken over somebody who's seeing the child every day or every other day. There is no room for egos and professional centrism, people thinking, oh, I'm the most important member of this team, anywhere. And honestly, I should say the most important member of this team is the family, who is supported by a team of professionals. People have heard me say this many times. As professional, my job is to support the family. They are the superheroes and I am the sidekicks. They are the main characters and I am the supporting character in this story. So stop and reflect for a second. Who is on your team? If you are a parent, think about your child. If you are a professional, think about your professional team, or think about a particular child you are working with and what that child's team looks like. Who is on your team? What is their contribution? What is the knowledge, skills, perspective they are bringing? Who is missing? Who are we not hearing from? Who are we not listening to? And finally, who holds the power in this team? I love this question. I've been asking this question to myself ever since um, the early hearing detection intervention conference 2 years ago, when Dr. Jenna Voss presented on this topic. Who holds the power? It's a powerful question that we all should be asking ourselves. I see a question in the chat, which is, what is the difference between a teacher of the deaf and a special educator? Excellent question. Typically, it's related to the training of this person. So to become a teacher of the deaf or a special educator, in most parts of the world, you have to complete a bachelor's program or a diploma program or something like that. And if you are training to be a special educator, you are probably learning to work with children with a variety of challenges. So could be a child who has a learning disability, could be a child who has autism, could be a child who has cerebral palsy, could be a child who is deaf and hard of hearing, could be a child who is blind. When you are training to be a teacher of the deaf, you are focusing on learning how to teach children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Typically, the things you will learn about include audiology, speech development, language development, and it's very specific and particular to teaching children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Another aspect of it is, in many parts of the world, you can train to be a teacher of the deaf who specializes in teaching spoken language. You can train to be a teacher of the deaf who specializes in using sign language. You can train to be a teacher of the deaf who has learned to do both or a total communication approach. So I trained as a teacher of the deaf. Aladani trained as a teacher of the deaf. We went to the Smith College Clark School for the Deaf program many years ago. But we have worked as providers for children from birth through college. Aladani's experience has mostly been in early intervention. My experience has mostly been in school age children. So preschool, school age, all the way to high school. I currently work with a few students who are 14, 13 years and older. And we work on language, academics, social skills, etc. I hope that answers your question. If not, please type again in the Q&A and we will address it. Okay, so we've talked about hearing loss management in general. I want to talk about identification and diagnosis. This is a lot of information that's going to come your way, but please know that we are going to address this again next week. So don't feel like you have to learn all of this today. A series of audiological tests conducted by a pediatric audiologist help us diagnose, identify a child's hearing loss. I'm just going to say one sentence about it, even though we could spend a whole year just talking about this. An audiologist will choose active tests where the child has to show something. So like the child is holding a block, they hear a sound, they put a block in the bucket, or passive tests where the child doesn't have to do anything. They just have to sit and maybe the brain waves are being checked or something else is being checked, but the child doesn't have to do anything. What combination of tests are chosen depends on the age and stage of the child. And this is why you need a skilled pediatric audiologist who's going to figure out what is the best combination of assessments, of audiological evaluations to give us the information we are looking for. We will have like entire webinars on this later in the year. So I'll say that and stop right there because I am not an audiologist. This is not my area of expertise. But this is my area of expertise in terms of how families understand the information about their child's audiological evaluations. So we believe that at the end of every audiological appointment, families should receive information in a way that they understand and can answer the following questions. What is the type and degree of hearing loss? Not as percentages, not my child has 80% hearing loss, because that doesn't tell us exactly what the severity of the hearing loss is. What is heard without hearing technology? So if my child is not wearing a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, what can they hear with their ears only? And some people are surprised to know that their child can hear something. Very few children can hear nothing. Most children have some degree of residual hearing. And then the next question is, what is heard with hearing technology? When my child wears their hearing aid or cochlear implant, now what is all the things they can hear? And not just sounds, but words, speech perception, all of that. And again, that goes back to that audiogram with the orange line at the top. And we want to make sure when the child is doing the audiological tests with their hearing technology, we are as close to the top of the speech banana as possible. Just because we don't live in quiet environments all the time or ever, the other thing families need to understand is, what is the impact of background noise on my child's hearing and understanding? Write down these questions if you want. If you are a parent and you're like, oh, I actually don't know the answers to these questions, write these down, take them to your audiologist, ask the questions. If you are a professional, make sure your families know the answers to these questions. So this is something maybe you can discuss at your next session. And I mean, I'm assuming that you as the professional know this about every child you are working with. So if you don't know it, then there is some homework that needs to be done to better understand the child's hearing abilities. I'm just going to show this slide for 1 second. As with all things medicine, there are many words and terms used in audiology. And there is absolutely no reason for all of us to understand them just fine. Here are some of the terms that you will see used in the context of a child's hearing loss. We will be sharing definitions of all of these with you in the handout, as well as post them on our website. This information comes from the Centers for Disease Control, Hearing Loss in Children webpage, and we will make sure to link to that. Okay. Oof, I'm looking at the time. Quick note, just because a child has a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, that does not mean there is just one path forward. Every child should, ought to, have the opportunity to figure out what communication option and opportunities work best for them. And there is a spectrum. There are some children who speak, do not use any sign language, and there are some children who sign and do not use any spoken language, and everything in between. What we want to say is, what works for your child is what makes the choice right. And that comes from our friends at Hands and Voices. Please do check out this parent organization that supports communication options and modalities of all sorts. In any situation, when considering options, it is important to consider the language of the home and the heart, because children learn from adults who speak to them in a meaningful, engaging manner. So whether they are speaking in Hindi or English or another language or sign language, making sure that they have people to learn from becomes a critical factor. The age and the state of the child should also be taken into account when discussing this. Okay, another very heavy, busy slide. So take a second and everybody read. Oops, did the captioning just disappear? Oh no, it's there, good. Sorry, I'm like very nervous with the whole internet thing today. Okay, so now I'm gonna read this out loud. If the desired outcome is learning to listen and learning through listening, and there are many ways to learn. Children can learn through listening. Children can learn through listening and watching the lips. Children can learn through listening and use of sign and gestures. Children can learn through listening and use of cued speech. Children can learn through a variety of ways. If the desired outcome is learning to listen and learning through listening, hearing technology must provide auditory access to the entire speech spectrum, not in the speech banana, but above the speech banana. So many children who have cochlear implants get aided cochlear implant. When you go for your mapping, you get the audiological thresholds. There's a test of what sounds can your child hear. We want those numbers to be high up. Not everybody is going to hear at 10 decibels, but we want them as high up as possible. We will have more information and webinars about this when we talk about audiological assessments later in the year. Understanding what a child can hear with the hearing technology is critical to the child's listening, speech, language, cognition, and communication development. Often when I'm working with families or professionals, mostly professionals, or if I'm mentoring my LSLS mentees, sometimes something will come up with the child, and 9 out of 10 times, my first question is, what do we know about how well they hear? Without figuring out what the auditory input is, figuring out anything else is quite tricky. Just a quick review of what hearing aids do. Take a look and read. The piece that I want to highlight here is that digital hearing aids have to be programmed for specific hearing loss. Just like, when you have glasses, you go to the ophthalmologist, check the number of your glasses and make sure the glasses are for that number. You don't just randomly pick whatever glasses are in the store. Same thing with digital hearing aids. They have to be programmed to fit the child's hearing loss. And hearing aids, we know, can provide adequate auditory access to children with mild, moderate, severe hearing losses. If a child has a conductive hearing loss, bone-anchored hearing aids can be used. We're not going to discuss them today or right now, but we can provide more information. I have written the same statement again because understanding what a child can hear with their hearing aids is critical for the child's listening, speech, language, cognition, and communication development, as well as planning intervention by the professionals. Cochlear implants, same thing, right? They are different than hearing aids, but their goal is to help children, help adults, help individuals hear the sounds of speech. And for that, a child has to be mapped periodically. Soon after the activation, we anticipate frequent mapping every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 6 weeks, until the child's map is stabilized and is as close up to the speech banana as possible. And then with little kids who are still, in the early listening stages, your audiologist might recommend a map check every 3 months or every 6 months. Every audiologist I have worked with has said for children up to the ages of 8, we want to see them every 6 months. Maybe we will change nothing in the map, but we want to make sure nothing is malfunctioning or needs adjustment or such. Children older than 8, audiologists that I have worked with have always said at least once a year, if not every 6 months. So Parents, think about when was your child's last mapping appointment and what happened in that appointment. Professionals, make sure you know when the child's last mapping appointment was, what their auditory benefit is, and when the next one needs to be. And sometimes, as professionals, we need to help families remember that this is an important aspect of making sure that we can continue to learning to listen and learning through listening. Because, oh, not because, let me do this one more bit. We also have assisting hearing technology. So this could be the FM system, the Roger DM system, a remote microphone system, and all of these are assistive hearing technologies that can help improve hearing in noisy settings. We'll share more about this. So these are devices used on top of, in addition to the hearing aids and cochlear implants, in classrooms, school assemblies, for sports, for family gatherings. And we do not see these as a crutch or weakness or failure. It is what a child needs to have the best access with the least amount of listening fatigue. To me, not using assistive hearing technology is like saying, oh, a child has glasses, but oh, we won't get the sunglasses because they should just practice looking at the sun. That's important. What if they have to practice looking at the sun? That makes no sense. If sunglasses are required, then we wear sunglasses. I think about assistive hearing technology the exact same way. If those are required for better access, then we use them. And all of this to say is hearing technology is just a tool. How much you benefit from it depends on how you use it. So for many families, it feels like getting a cochlear implant is, oh, excellent, now we are done. As a teacher of the deaf, I'm telling you, that is when we begin. I've been very fortunate to work in multidisciplinary teams my entire career, where I have had a chance to work with pediatric audiologists, speech language pathologists, otologists, so ENT surgeons, as well as other teachers of the deaf, physical therapists, occupational therapists, who come together, all together, to think about how can we help this child. And getting an implant, wearing an implant, getting a hearing aid is just part of that process. What comes after is how is what determines how well a child might benefit. We recently did a post about this on our website, and we called it a cochlear implant is a tool like a pencil. And go check it out. I see a question in the chat about when the handout will be available. We will post it widely on our website, on WhatsApp, on everywhere, probably again in 8 to 10 days after the second session is over. I see a question about residual hearing after implant. I will hold on to it. And Aladani, if I don't answer, please remind me. But let's finish this and I'll come back to that. And I think you're going to hear way better things about it from our guest speakers in the future. So I have dumped a lot of information on you. Stop for a second and think about your thoughts in your mind as they relate to hearing loss identification, diagnosis, hearing technology, and hearing technology usage. If you have a question, and especially if you have questions about individual children, we will not answer them right now. Please feel free to contact us via email or via WhatsApp, and we will be happy to answer questions, because oftentimes a question related to a particular child is not a straightforward yes/no question, and many factors need to be considered to make an informed decision. All right. This is what we'll talk about next week. intervention for auditory development, therapy, strategies, all of that. One thing that you can do starting today, right now, and not even wait till next week, is focus on consistent device usage. We have research, and I'll talk more about that next week, that shows that how well a child's language develops is related to when the child started wearing their hearing technology, which was programmed appropriately for the whole day, full time, 8 to 12 hours or all waking days. Research that was conducted last year by Dr. Park and colleagues, showed that the age at which a child got an implant was less predictive of how well a child's language developed than the age at which a child started wearing their cochlear implant full time. Yeah. Similar findings have been seen in children who use hearing aids. Device usage, device wear time are critical factors that impact outcomes. So consistent device usage, creating a need to listen. A child will learn to listen and learn through listening only if they need to. Children are smart. They are not going to do extra work if they don't have to. But if you say, hey, do you want water? Then they have to listen to it. Do you want chocolate? Then they have to listen to it. But if you just say, hey, do you want water? Then, maybe they heard water, maybe they didn't hear water, but they definitely saw this and they know this is about drinking something. Yeah. So creating a balance between auditory and visual input. Let me also say this. This does not mean that we put our hands behind us and only talk, or use like cover our mouth like this and talk to children like this, because none of that is natural. We want to focus on natural auditory input, but keeping in mind what visual cues are available to children. Giving a child something meaningful to listen to is important for teaching children to learn to listen and learn through listening. And that includes conversations with you, parents and professionals, singing with you, and reading with you. And we'll talk more about that next week. There is a question about if aided thresholds are above the speech banana, does it imply better hearing and noise too? Simple answer, probably. Complex answer, depends on hearing technology and what kind of noise reduction programming has been done. The only way to know for sure is to do speech perception testing in noise with varying signal to noise ratios. Man, I never just give a yes, do it, good job kinds of answers. So yes, most likely, probably, but it's not that simple. There has to be more checking. So these are the 5 things I hope we discussed today. These are the 5 things I hope that you are taking away today. I hope everybody is thinking, oh, listening is a brain-based activity. Sound goes through the ears to the brain, and it makes sense there. Unmanaged hearing loss impacts many areas of development. Hearing technology can provide access to auditory information. We have this technology that allows children of varying degrees of hearing loss to have listening and spoken language as an option. But still remember, hearing technology is only a tool that has to be used and maintained by children, families, and professionals. And finally, and we'll focus on this next week, learning to listen and learning through listening has to be developed in a consistent, systematic way, keeping in mind the child's age and stage of development, which we will talk about more next time. I'll pause here for a second to see if there are questions, comments, thoughts. I'm going to answer this one question real quick. What would you suggest to a parent with children with moderate or unilateral hearing loss, especially regarding the urgency of intervention? I am not sure who this is, but if you message me separately, I can give you more research on this. But one of the things we will include in the handout is the impact of moderate, minimal, unilateral, mild hearing losses on learning language, learning in the classroom. And it is important that children receive training to be able to do this with their hearing technology. So if we invest early, then they are not going to fall behind later. There is a classic study that has shown that children with mild minimal hearing losses were as much as one grade behind, one standard behind their hearing peers in general education school. So even though they can hear quite a lot and pretty well, they were still needing some support to move on. I haven't talked about listening fatigue, which is an issue for all children, especially children with unilateral moderate hearing losses who might not be using hearing technology consistently. All of that for future webinars. But yeah, all hearing losses are educationally significant. So if this is a family who wants their child to succeed at school in academics as well as socially, early investment pays off in the long run. Okay. Oh, there are some tough questions. Okay, this is an easy one. The slides that I showed will be available via handouts. If this is something you want to share with your team, with your family, with your professionals, with your patients, we can give you some more specific information if that is what you're looking for. If you are, please email us at info@listeningtogether.com, which Aladani has already typed in the chat. Another popular question that we get every time: can two languages spoken at home confuse the child and hamper his speech? Speech is the sounds we make, so two languages should not really impact speech, but they may impact language, and the impact will be dependent on who is talking to the child, how often, what is the quality and quantity of input. Again, I recommend that you watch our 20-minute webinar on supporting spoken language development in children who are deaf, multiple spoken language development, as well as read our blog post, AEIOU of bilingualism, to get a better understanding of this topic. We will include that in the handout as well. It's a very popular question and resource. Yes, and Aladin just typed our website. So if you go to listeningtogether.com, go to the blog and look for AEIOU of bilingualism, you will find this. Okay, this is a really tough question, and it breaks my heart to answer this. We've been asked, if we can't get the type of therapist who can handle a 2-year-old baby, what can parents do? This is tough. This is hard. Parents should look to professionals for support. Parents should have professionals who can provide them this support. I think there is no simple answer again, but a couple things I would do in this case would be, one, to find somebody else who maybe has more knowledge, and how you find that person is through a parent-to-parent network. Talk to other parents you know, see who might be a better, more appropriate therapist that's a better fit for your child. And the reality is, you as the parent are the expert on the child, and the therapist, the professional, should be able to take your suggestions, take your advice to work with the 2-year-old. 2-year-olds are difficult to work with. It takes a special skill set and deep understanding of what is appropriate for a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old who is expected to sit in a chair and pay attention for 60 minutes, that's just inappropriate. That's wrong. 2-year-olds don't do that. 2-year-olds attend for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And you just have to go with their flow. You have to follow the child's lead. When I share the family-centered intervention, early intervention principles, that might be some guidance for what kind of professional you are looking for. It is also possible that you might be better served by somebody who is an early childhood educator, a preschool teacher, an Anganwadi teacher who understands early development, who understands early language development. And that's what I meant when I said, like, it's a team of professionals who is bringing what knowledge to your team, what is missing. I just want to voice what Ladani said in the chat. She said, if there are parents in the audience who would like to be connected with other parents, please get in touch with us. Okay, and we have 2 more minutes. So let me do a call to action. Here is my call to action. Remember at the beginning, I said, we are here to share information, build capacity, foster leadership. It's not going to happen by a team of 3 women. It's going to happen by all of us working together at our levels, at different levels, within our spheres of impact, within our circles of impact. So I want to challenge you to think about this. Whether you are a parent, a professional, a grandparent, a community member, an adult who is deaf and hard of hearing, whoever you might be and are joining us today, what action will you take to create a ripple of change? Those of you who have seen our Maya and Sid books know that this is Maya, who wears 2 cochlear implants and is, ready to take over the world. What is the action you want to take that will create waves, that will create ripples of change? What is the change you want to make at the personal level? Like, I want to change how I blank. What is the change you want to make in your family unit or in your work family unit? What is the change you want to see in your broader community? And what will you do for that? And what is the change you want to see in the world? Because, it just doesn't happen. We have to make it happen. And with that thought, I would love if you share this in the chat and share with us your intention, your action plan to create change in the world, to create change within yourself, within family, community. So next week, we will talk about intervention. We'll talk very specifically about the auditory hierarchy, strategies and activities, assessment and progress monitoring. So be thinking, bring your questions, come prepared. When this webinar ends, there will be a post-webinar survey. We highly encourage you all to do it. It will help us prepare for next week, and it will give us general feedback about the information that was presented as well. Handouts and recordings will be made available after next week. Like I said, we'll have other webinars in this series about auditory brain development, audiological assessments, and higher level listening skills all throughout this year. So stay tuned. We just want to thank you for being here, for taking time and spending time with us today. If this was helpful to you, we encourage you to share our website, our resources, and social media posts with those who might find it beneficial as well. If this is a message, if this is information you want to share with more people, feel free to invite us to present at your organization. Listening Together is happy to present at various locations, in person, online, in the US, outside of the US, wherever in the world. to share information about what is possible for children who are deaf and hard of hearing, who are learning to listen and speak. And finally, if this is something you think is worthy of your support, please donate on our website or via Facebook. We are still looking to figure out how to manage donations from India. But if you're in India and are wanting to donate, please contact us and we will go from there. If you have asked individual questions about your child, either in the chat or in the Q&A, I'm sure by now Aladani has gotten in touch with you. If you need to get in touch with us, you can email us at info@listeningtogether.com. Once again, we are grateful for the support from Butte Creek Foundation for this webinar series for 2021. And we want to thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next week. I will stay for a minute and answer any questions that are there. But as soon as this webinar ends, a survey will pop up. Please complete it. It will help us plan for next week. Thank you all for joining. All right. I don't see any questions. So I will end the webinar so that you all can complete the survey. Tomorrow in Hindi at 7:30 p.m. India time, 9 a.m. US Central time. All right. See you then. Bye.